Greetings, inhabitants of this blue and green sphere that's hanging out in space. Welcome to League on Lock. My name is Eric, and you've waited long enough. It's finally time to go through the power rankings for the LEC, the first year of franchising in Europe, and we can compare how well it does compared to North America. Already, a lot of these hype-up videos, I'm going to be honest, are looking way better than anything we got out of NA. The original hype-up video for the spring split in 2018 was just boring. It was just a bunch of pictures of some of the new players and close-ups of them. So that's boring. Europe is doing it right. We're going 10-1. There are tons of new brands and new teams hitting the scene for 2019. And starting off with number 10, it is one of those new teams, and it is the UK-based exceL eSports coming in. They've played in the UK scene pretty much, done everything that you can there, and they brought on a couple of UK-based players in exceL and Kadrill. And before we really dive into these, I just want to say that there's going to be no H2K this year. You're not going to have a 2-16 team, someone that's just absolutely horrible and way worse than anyone else in the league, even though Kadrill was part of that debacle that was H2K. We have exceL at number 10, but they are going to be way, way, way better than H2K. And any of the bottom three teams, I think you're going to see compete and still get a decent amount of wins here in 2019. Kadrill, by the way, is the main critique we've had about this roster. I still can't believe he actually wants to play jungle after the terrible memories he probably has from that H2K summer and really spring roster when he was jungling. But on paper, this roster, obviously, it's underwhelming, I'll say, the very least, because, I mean, you basically just have guys who are not at the top of their position. Even a guy like exceL, we saw him playing on Origin. He was a third-tier sub for Fnatic, but we haven't really seen him on the biggest stage in a long time. Obviously, when he was on G2, he was still fantastic. But exceL as a brand, I think they're doing a pretty decent job coming here onto the scene. All the announcement videos for all the new teams when they came into the LEC, when it was announced that they would join, were already better than most of the NA teams. You didn't hear about anything from the likes of Clutch or Golden Guardians for a pretty long time. So exceL already stepping it up in the content department and bringing in fans for them. But this team, like I said, it's probably going to be number 10 or at least one of the bottom teams, but they're not going to be as bad, I think, as people are expecting. exceL and exceL definitely have some potential to actually show up and develop as a pretty decent looking bottom lane, because exceL put up some fantastic performances on the Movistar Riders in the minor regions there, but the main question mark for them is still going to be in that mid lane, of course, with Exile coming in. We've talked about it so often. This guy shows glimpses of being a fantastic EU mid, and then he, more often than not, is showing himself dying unnecessarily. But you see the damage numbers, the laning phase numbers actually weren't bad. His CS differential was middle of the pack, but he was still, in these team fights, he was the main carry threat for the Unicorns last year, even though he was dying so much. 1.9 KDA. It was whether being ganked, disrespecting junglers, but this year he's losing the H in his name, which means maybe that a little bit less weight means he won't die as often. I mean, it's just pushing in the side lanes with no vision when you don't know where anyone else on the team is, getting caught out, dying that way, or like we've said so many times, just completely disrespecting the fact that the opposing jungler, there's a darn good chance that he's going to show up and he's still pushing too far forward in that lane, maybe with a new coaching staff. And I feel like there just wasn't enough leadership on Unicorns. I think Cold really, it was up to him to take the reins on that entire display for them. Maybe the likes of exceL and exceL coming in are enough to kind of help Exile avoid those deaths when it comes to the laning phase. But for now, exceL come in at number 10 on the power rankings. And we're moving right on to number 9, and it's, yes, another team. New team coming in, but this one has got a little bit of NA flavor. We're talking about Rogue, who, yes, they are an NA-based team heading over to the EU LEC now because there's no more spots in North America. This is the team that has backing from Imagine Dragons and Steve Aoki, so immediately they should have a pretty decent fan base. My main problem with this squad is, as you'll see with the other bottom 3 teams, including exceL, you don't have any up-and-coming young talent. Pretty much all 5 of these players, I feel like they've either reached their ceiling or you know what you're going to get out of them because they've been around for a few years now. This is one of the earliest rosters announced in the offseason, and I think immediately people were a little bit disappointed, underwhelmed by what they were seeing here. So I am too. I think initially, maybe because there is so much years of experience on this roster, maybe they jump out of the gates and can get some wins early on here. But I think even the likes of exceL and some of the other teams that we'll get to later on with that youth movement and some unproven rookies, guys that they want to develop and see what they're capable of on the LEC stage, I definitely like that approach more than kind of how Rogue built this roster. Obviously, there are some serious Roccat ties here with Freddie as the coach, Prophet coming over. Wadid used to play on Rocket, and obviously HeQ. This team basically took Roccat from 2018, but they forgot the good parts. They didn't bring Memento, and they didn't bring Norskaren, which were far and away the 2 best aspects of that Roccat roster in 2018. And Prophet and HeQ, quite frankly, were some of the biggest weak points for that roster. So kind of building a new team around them doesn't seem like the smartest strategy to me, and that's why right now we have them coming in at number 9. One of the most interesting parts of this team is, of course, sencux in the mid lane, and whereas Exile was the featured guy on his squad and cost them because he was constantly getting caught out and dying, sencux at times on Misfits, the first half of summer was absolutely incredible, and then towards the end when Misfits hit their massive slump, which by the way wasn't solely on him, but he basically went invisible. And even during some of their win streaks, you didn't really notice him in these games. Misfits would get these huge leads and it just wouldn't really involve him at all. He would have the 0-0-0 scoreline in some of these matchups, but he looked so good at times, and then he somehow just fell off a cliff towards the end. When he initially came on to Misfits, people were saying, okay, he's going to be a downgrade from Power of Evil because he's one of the premier mid laners in EU. And in spring, he definitely looked like that. And then he had that 7 or 8 week stretch with Misfits where they looked great. The meta right now, probably not the greatest for sencux. He definitely likes those more control mages or characters. He loves the Galio, the Malzahar, anything where you're just kind of setting up your teammates in these team fights more so than being the carry in those fights, even though at times that Yasuo pick for him was really working out. But I think he wants to be there more to set up his team, and I just don't think that Rogue has the players for him to be able to do that in the likes of Prophet and HeQ, and even Kikis, a guy we haven't really talked about yet on this roster. I just feel like the way Vitality played was perfect to his play style, being super aggressive, all about that early game, and just really trying to end games in 10-minute stretches where you just completely snowball through that run. I don't know if Rogue is going to be able to apply that play style to this squad, so I don't think we're going to see Kikis play nearly as well or really take over games as much as he did without the luxuries of having the laners that Vitality had. So I think that might have been an anomaly almost of what we saw out of Kikis during his time on Vitality, but who knows? Rogue, right now, I think they'll have a decent fan base, and again, much like exceL, they've done a pretty decent job of branding. They're obviously already involved in a bunch of esports, different esports than League right now, but for us, we got Rogue coming in at number 9 on the power rankings for the spring split in 2019.